Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz here in the Overflow Room, reminding you that the ClassicsToday.com CD store, the merch store, is open, where you can get fabulous T-shirts and hats and winter cap things and water bottles and coffee mugs and all kinds of stuff, all with our fabulous various slogans on them. Right now, our top seller is the T-shirt that says abnormal is fine, stupid is not, followed up by the Make America Classical Again. Get yours for the Christmas season. There's a link at the bottom of this video where you can go to take a look and see what's available. I have to do that, my friends. Thank you for staying with me this long. Anyway, so much for the infomercial. Today, we are going to talk about the best and one of the worst recordings of Ravel's Daphnis and Chloé. Holy mackerel, there are so many of these things. My goodness. I mean, I've got, just to talk about the good ones, 18 Daphne and Chloé. I mean, I don't know what the plural is, and I really would appreciate no one telling me. But yes, many of them. This is widely considered to be Ravel's masterpiece. It's his largest work in any form. It's about an hour long. It's scored for an enormous orchestra, including a wordless choir that does nothing but go ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, and whatnot. And then has the most orgasmic final climax in the concluding bacchanal that has ever been written in Western music. And you know it's orgasmic because it uses castanets. I did a whole video on how you can't have an orgy without castanets. You can look it up. But yes, it's true. The castanets are there, so you know that sex is involved. It's really an extraordinarily beautiful piece. It really is. It's so pretty sometimes that performances can kind of get lost in the perfume of it all. I mean, it has more harp glissandos per minute than any other work in the repertoire. It really does. And the thing you really need to keep in mind in performing Daphnis and Chloé is that it really is what Ravel called it, a choreographic symphony, a symphony choreographic. Now, this does not mean it's like a four-movement symphony or that it has, movements like, it's not, you didn't mean it that way, because it's a symphony to be danced. And the music is continuous, although it has three major scenes. No, what Ravel meant is that the piece is assembled symphonically through the constant reappearance and quasi-sometimes development of just a few basic motives, in between the other things that are characteristic of each scene. He doesn't limit himself to that. Those motives are the horn call at the very beginning, which is ya da ba da 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 da. Yes, the horn thing. Then there's the chorus part when they're going ah. It's very interesting. It sounds very erotic and sultry when being played by, or hummed or moaned by the chorus in Daphnis and Chloé. It happens to be basically the same motive that begins Vaughan Williams' Fifth Symphony on the horns, ya da 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 da, where it sounds as chaste and pure as the driven snow, which tells you a lot about how timbre contributes to our impression of the musical meaning or affect that a piece, that a motive or a theme may have. Very, very interesting. Anyway, and there are a couple others. There are a couple of others. There's the opening, ya da 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 da. That's something like that, or ya da 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 da. You hear them all over the place. I don't need to tell you what they are because they're not developed to the point where you don't hear them. You don't recognize them. Ravel wants you to, and it's all very clear what's going on. But the point I want to make about Ravel's use of these motives is that he wanted the piece to have a certain coherence and unity. And in order to maintain that, you have to play it flowingly. You can't die, and you can't italicize your way through it. There are certain sort of set pieces. For example, there's Chloe's dance of supplication in the second scene. Well, she's very supplicatory. And in order to be supplicatory, I mean, the music is so graphic. In their pantomime thing, there's pantomime things where they it's not specific dancing. It's like moving the plot along with acting. And the pantomime things are incredibly detailed in their imagery and their suggestiveness. And for example, in Chloe's dance of supplication, that's not a pantomime, that's a dance, but the dance is yadam, yada, wadam, yada, like that. Now, that gets repeated about 3 trillion times in Chloe's dance of supplication. And if you play Chloe's dance of supplication without the necessary rhythm or just too slowly, it can seem to go on forever. And supplication is not exactly a fun musical quality to listen to. It's kind of whiny. And it can be gently pathetic and very sweet and lovely when Chloe is doing it, if she does it right. And the conductor has to do it right. So, I mean, that's one example of what needs to be kept moving. The other thing is, there's this dude named Dorcon the dude. And Dorcon the dude is in love with Chloe along with Daphnis, and he tries to entice her with his grotesque dancing. Dorcon does the dorky dance of dorkitude. And the dorky dance of dorkitude is very, very, it's grotesque. It's blah, blah, blue, do, 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 boo, do, 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 ba-da-da, 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 like that, right? And then finally it all goes to pieces because he's making a fool of himself and everyone laughs at him. The little nymphs and the horns do the laughing. They go, I mean, it's very obvious that they are laughing at him. And that's another one of those things where, it's supposed to sound funny and it's supposed to sound exaggerated, but you have to keep it going. And I've heard performances of it where, whenever one of the main numbers comes along, it's as if everything stops and it happens in its own tempo and its own pace and its own thing, and it's not integrated into the overall fabric. But the point Ravel was making is that all of these set pieces, if you want to call them that, these specific dances are supposed to be part of the overall flow. So you have just this fabulous hour-long, or 55 minutes, it should be a little less than an hour, panorama that continually moves. And that's really the only thing you can do to ruin it. There are some horrible, horrible performances of Daphnis. You can read some wonderful bad reviews of Daphnis, or reviews of bad Daphnises, let's put it that way, at classicstoday.com. One of my, all-time most loathsome Daphniae was the Levine Vienna Philharmonic, because boy, was there an orchestra that just had the wrong sound all the way through, and his conducting of it was so unimaginative and rigid, and the sonics were kind of glary, early digital. It was just awful. And when the piece is bad, it's really, really bad. But I have here 18 recordings of very, very good Daphnises. I got really hooked on this piece, like when I was in high school. I got so hooked on it that I started to write my own epic poem called Pancreas and Cilia. And I only completed book 1, but I still have it sitting around somewhere, believe it or not, like 45 pages. After I was taking a course in Milton, we were doing Paradise Lost, and I was bored out of my mind. So during class, I said, I can do this. I wrote my own ancient Greek epic poem called Pancreas and Cilia, and it was a lot of fun. And every day I would do a page or two and pass it around to all of my friends while the professor was droning on about Paradise Lost. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. If I run out of ideas in this video, for these videos, maybe I will do a reading of my epic poem. You just better pray that I don't run out of ideas. Because believe me, you have better things to do as well. So, what are the recordings? The best Daphnises and Chloe's. Oh, the story. I have to tell you the story. Wait a minute. I mean, we all know this. Ballets have very primitive stories, right? Somebody does something, then they dance about it, and then something else happens, and they dance some more, And then everything stops so they can do a divertissement and dance a bit more. And then the plot happens again and they dance some more. But in these kinds of ballets, like what Ravel was doing, the modern French school, they weren't doing classical ballet. They weren't doing multi-act extravaganzas. They were doing basically one-act single works that told a simple story in a reasonable amount of time. So you don't have these divertissement distractions. Everything is sort of dedicated toward the plot, but you don't have a lot of time. And dancing takes time, so the plot has to be rather simple. And the plot is simple. There's nymphs, there's shepherds, it's ancient Greece, it's Arcadian Greece. It's, a very idealized and stylized ancient Greece. Ravel called it the ancient Greece of his dreams. And he must have had some dreams there, So what happens is that Daphnis is in love with Chloé. Dorcon is in love with Chloé. Daphnis and Chloé, dump Dorcon. And then a bunch of pirates show up and they kidnap Chloé. And Daphnis is very upset. And then there's a scene in the pirates' camp. And actually, there's a sort of a night scene, which is for chorus only, a wonderful interlude for offstage choir. It's just terrific. And they moan and groan, and then the pirates come on and they do pirate-like things, including an excerpt from Ravel's Rhapsody Espagnole. And they go yum, it's right out of the Rhapsody Espagnole. And eventually, because Daphnis is upset, the god Bacchus or Dionysus, I think it's in Greek, so whatever it is, takes pity on him and looms up, and the pirates run away in terror, and the stage goes black. And then there's a sunrise, and Ravel spends lots and lots of time doing the sunrise because it's the most beautiful sunrise in the world. And the sunrise is the thing that starts the second suite, which is the most popular bit of the ballet, which is the entire last scene, basically. So the sun comes up, and everyone's really happy that the sun's coming up, and Daphnis and Chloé are reunited, and then there's an orgy. And the orgy is it's in 5/4 time, which is quite tricky. It really is. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yum-ba-da, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a very rhythmically irregular orgy, and which makes it only more orgiastic. And it's also based melodically on a bit of Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. Dum-ba-da, da-da-da-dum-ba-da, da-da-da-dum-ba-da, da-da-da-dum-ba-da. It does that, which is obviously from Scheherazade. And, so Ravel gets his tributes in there in a couple places. And it ends with this, fabulous thing that happens there. It's it's just terrific. Absolutely terrific. I just love the work. I really do. But I don't listen to it as often as I used to because I find that it's so pretty and so stylizedly pretty that you can have too much of a good thing. I suggest you kind of take your time with it and save it for special occasions. While you're getting to know it, you can listen to it every 5 minutes if you want. That's okay. But after, overindulging on it, you need to sort of, give it a rest and then come back to it. And so I've come back to it, and these are my 18 favorite recordings out of dozens. I did see one horrible live performance. It was the worst performance I've ever heard. It was, guess who? Simon Rattle of the City of Birmingham Symphony. He recorded the complete ballet, which is not a very good performance of it. And he did it in Carnegie Hall. The concert, he did these bizarre concerts. He really did. And there were things like, the concert was Nielsen's Third Symphony and Daphnis and Chloé. Now, talk about, two pieces that should never appear on the same program. Never in a million years. It's like putting chocolate sauce on fried liver and onions. It's just, oh. And what was horrible about it, was the Nielsen was a terrible performance, and it was made even worse so because the then Mrs. Rattle was Elise Ross. Remember her? She did the 7 Deadly Sins with him. She really had very little voice. And she couldn't even do the wordless vocalises in the second movement of the Nielsen. I mean, that was just awful. And then he did the complete Daphnis and Chloé, leaving out the chorus. Now, let's face it, folks. You can do the second suite without the chorus. You can do the first suite without the chorus, I suppose, if you have to. Ravel marked it optional. But if you're going to do the complete ballet, you must have the chorus. Otherwise, there's just no point. I mean, there's a whole interlude that's just for the chorus. You can dub it instrumentally, I suppose. I don't know. I didn't stay. I didn't stay to find out what he did. They started doing it without the chorus, and I got up and left. There are very few concerts I've ever walked out on in my life, maybe 2 or 3 in my whole life. But that was one of them because it was just an abomination. And after having sat through miserable Nielsen, I wasn't going to sit through the, chocolate sauce part after having indigestible fried liver and onions. So let's talk about the recordings. Enough of this. Let's see. First, historical recording. This is the historical recording I think people might want to hear. Engelbrecht. Désiré Émile Engelbrecht. He's better known for his Debussy than he was for his Ravel. He was a colleague of Debussy, but this is real, authentic French stuff. Now, some of the playing is, a little scruffy. This is with the chorus and orchestra of the French radio from 1953. I mean, they were sort of a scrappy band back then. Originally, this is on Testament now. It was with André Charlin. Remember his albums, his label? And but there's something authentic about the way Engelbrecht does these things, even when he's a little bit off sometimes. And I just enjoy it, and it's fun to hear to get closer to what was going on at the premiere, which we'll get to anon. So hang in there. So Engelbrecht, one of the good ones. What's another good one? Oh, this is another sort of potentially historical. This is stereo. It's very good. Ansermet. Ansermet's Ravel was generally wonderful. Again, the Suisse Romande Orchestra was nothing to write home about, but these are famous recordings by a guy who was there and who really understood the style and whose view of the music was, I think, quite simpatico. With Ravel. Ansermet was a mathematician. He was, Ravel was a clockmaker. There's a certain precision and coolness and rhythmic pertness to what they did, to what Ansermet did. That's quite appropriate. So I enjoyed this performance too. And, it's now locked away in a big Ansermet box somewhere probably. But, maybe we're due to get some of this stuff back. It's there. It's good. It's one of the good ones. But this is one of my favorites, actually. I think these performances are just amazingly wonderful. It's a slow performance, but a fabulously idiomatic one. This is Manuel Rosenthal. Now, Manuel Rosenthal, he lived until sometime into the 2000s. He was like 160. This is the guy who did Gaieté Parisienne, who arranged it from Offenbach. He was very well known for doing his things in French theatrical circles and ballet circles. He did 2 sets. They were on Ades. That's what this label was, of Debussy orchestral music and Ravel orchestral music. And they are wonderful. Rosenthal was just amazing. And this Daphnis takes a good 60 minutes, 61 minutes, but it's so atmospheric. It's so compelling, and it goes to show that catching the right flow, the right atmosphere, isn't a function of absolute speed. It's a function of rhythm and texture and keeping the ear engaged. And boy, does he do that. And the sound was pretty good on these too. This is from, does it say what it was? 1959. And it's just a wonderful performance. Rosenthal is one of those guys, if you see his stuff, grab it. He actually recorded a couple of his ballets, including Gaieté Parisienne, for Naxos. He lived that long, which is astonishing. One of those guys who was just around forever. And it's fantastic. What's this one? Oh, well, we all know this one. Charles Dutoit. Now, Dutoit's Daphnis caused a sensation, especially in the UK, because it was a Decca recording at the time. And, Decca had always been famous for doing French music because Decca had Ansermet. Decca originally was based in Geneva. And the head of Decca was a guy named Maurice Rosengarten, who was based in Geneva and who loved the Suisse Romande. That's why Ansermet and the Suisse Romande did all that stuff they did, because Decca was headquartered there. But then it moved to London, and in the 60s and 70s or whenever it happened, I don't know. And when this came out, it was an early digital recording. It was a blockbuster. It was the recording that put Dutoit and Montreal on the musical map. They then went on to record all the rest of the Ravel orchestral music, and none of it was as good. None of it sounded as good. But this Daphnis was gorgeous. It was special. It was beautiful. It sounded marvelous. I mean, the orchestra and Dutoit, they were really up for it because it really mattered. I mean, it was going to make or break their reputation, and they made it. And then they went on to do, as you know, a million recordings of other things, some of which were extremely good, some of which were less so, just like everyone else in this business. They did too much. And the worst thing, I think, was the 1812 overture with the synthesizer in place of the brass band and the cannons. It sounded like a calliope on auto destruct. It was just, ugh. But they also did some marvelous things, so I can't say. But the best of the Ravel was still their first, the Daphnis and Chloé, and it's a beautiful performance. Absolutely beautiful. Still sounds great. So that's nice to have. Let's see. Who's next here? Oh, I've got my stack conveniently here so I don't keep dropping it all over the place. Abbado with the London Symphony. Abbado's Ravel with the LSO is one of the best things he did when he was with the LSO. I mean, it's just wonderful. The only problem with the Daphnis, it was one of the late ones, and it was one of those early digitals that didn't have quite the same body that the analog recordings had. For some reason, I don't know. I mean, was it all digital or were some of these analog? I don't want to make a fool of myself, which I tend to do. It's all digital. Well, some sounded better than other ones. Let's just put it that way. And one of the things that Abbado had in some of these recordings was one of those super duper low dynamic level pianissimos, which makes the soft bits very, very hard to hear. But Abbado was a fabulous Ravel conductor. I mean, he was a micromanager, and Ravel was a micromanagement composer. They were perfect together. They really were. The best thing in this box still is the bolero, where you have the orchestra screaming at the end. You know, it's yum, ba-da-da, hey, hey, thump, ba-da-da, hey. You know, the chorus yells. It's really fun. You know, Abbado wasn't a fun conductor, but here he let them have some fun. And the Daphnis is great, too. It really is very, very good. Gorgeously played. Absolutely gorgeous. And it's got to be. It's Daphnis. If it isn't gorgeous, what's the point, you know? And whose is this here? Let's see. Martinon. Martinon's Ravel and Debussy box is an absolute classic. You know, all the Debussy and Ravel orchestral works, it's just greatness. From first note to last, the Debussy is better recorded than the Ravel. The problem with the Ravel, there were two different orchestras. This is with the Orchestre de Paris. There's no bass in these recordings. You know, there was some of those French recordings could be done in somewhat cavernous acoustics with a rather swimmy amount of resonance. And there just needs to be more of a low end, and there's just no low end here. I'm not sure why. But the performance itself is marvelous. The playing as such is quite good. And, I mean, there are performances as part of Martinon's Ravel that are amazing, like the Ma Mère Loire, still my favorite one, the Mother Goose Ballet. And this is great, too. Of course, he did the second suite for RCA with the Chicago Symphony, and that is not something to shake a stick at either, I might add. So, that one's really good. And, oh yeah. Now, I have here, let me see, 3. I put 3 down here that I sort of grouped together. I grouped together because they're not, you know, Daphnises that you might think are done by people who would do great Daphnises, but they're great because they're fabulously played and fabulously recorded and just incredible examples of great playing and engineering and conducting. They really just are. And I have all 3 of them, and I think they really deserve to sort of be considered together. So let's just do it. Let's do it together. Here they are. There they are. Pick a card, any card. Pick a CD. Now, these are Lauren Mazel with the Cleveland Orchestra on Eloquence, and Chailly with the Concertgebouw on Decca, and Yoel Levy with the Atlanta on Telarc. I would love to see Tellark do a Yoel Levy box. There was some really fine, fine stuff that he did. And it was over a very wide range of repertoire, but it's all kind of like spread out. You know, Tellark is now owned by Concord Music, I believe, and they really, really need to start organizing their catalog, like the other labels have done, because there could be some fantastic releases that I know you and I would have wonderful time with. But anyway, all three of these, I mean, you know, the Cleveland and Mazel are just like razor sharp and amazingly played and full of fire. Actually, it's a very fiery performance, a wonderful performance. This is the Concertgebouw, which you just want to hear do anything just about with Chailly. It's beautiful, and it's sensitive, and it's touching, and it's very, very coherent. And so is this. Don't knock Atlanta and Levy, because they could really, really play, and they really, really play here, and it's fabulously engineered. It's a great chorus, Robert Shaw's chorus, let's not forget, although he wasn't there any longer. But yes, it's a great, great Daphnis. So, 3 Daphni. And then, let's see here. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay. We're almost at the top 5. This is absolutely one of the great Daphnis and Chloés of modern day. And I talked about it because I talked about this box. This Myung-Whun Chung French music, Italian DG box thing. His Daphnis and Chloé is one of the best things he ever did. It's with the Bastille Orchestra. It's just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. One of the great modern Daphnis and Chloés. Perfectly atmospheric, amazingly exciting, gorgeously recorded. It really deserved to be available singly for the rest of its life in the catalog, but it's in this box, which I've already discussed, so I don't have to do it again. But just so you know, if you see it running around, you know, don't overlook it. Give it a shot, because it was really outstanding in every way. Absolutely amazing. All right, now we are at my top 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, the top 5. And these are all just impossibly grand, wonderful performances that everybody should have dozens of. First in the top 5, Ozawa and Boston, one of the great Ravel cycles. I have never understood why this particular Ravel cycle gets sort of poo-pooed by everyone as somehow second best. There is none better. You may have preferences, but this is for playing and sonics and interpretation. It's amazing. Ozawa was great with French music, and the orchestra, of course, was amazing with French music. I think what happened here was that the comparison was always made to Charles Munch, who was amazing. He was. To the detriment of Ozawa, because he wasn't Charles Munch. Well, nobody was Charles Munch, and that's okay. Ozawa was Ozawa, and he had very real character and personality in this music. And the orchestra plays like gods. It's phenomenal, and it's wonderfully well recorded. This is a great Daphnis. Don't underestimate it. It really is fabulous. So that goes back over there. And now we have 2 of them by the same guy. We have that twice here. Of course, Boulez. Now, there are 2 Boulez Daphnises. There's the New York one, and then there's his Berlin remake. The New York one is really, really, I think, kind of, it has a, how do I describe it? Almost a rustic quality to it. There's a tactile feeling to the playing that's really kind of special. It's not, surprising for Boulez, it's not ultra refined. It has a little bit of, dirt under its fingernails. And I really like that. It's like no other version. But the Berlin one, the remake, it's so beautiful. They play so well. I have to prefer the Berlin to the New York one. I just have to. Because this whole Ravel cycle is probably the best thing that Boulez did. This Ravel cycle in Berlin. He had them playing the daylights out of the music, and so gorgeously, and the engineering, they got it right, and it's just wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. This is one of the great Ravel records, and it comes with a really, really smoking Lavals. It's a great coupling, too. So, Boulez, the nice thing about these two Boulez recordings is that they're so different and both so wonderful. They really are. And I'm thrilled to have them both. I really am. They survived the toss onto the bed over there. They really are just great. And I recommend them very, very highly. The other one that you have to have, which we actually sort of talked about rather recently because we just did the big box, was, of course, Monteux. Monteux with the London Symphony and the Chorus of the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden. This is from 59. And, Monteux conducted the premiere. I mean, he was there. He conducted the premiere. He's another one of those guys like Toscanini, who I just did a video about his importance, his historical importance, who gives lie to all of the bullshit that we hear about performance practice, because Monteux was there. He was at the premiere of the Franck D Minor Symphony in 1888, and he recorded it in stereo in the 1960s. These guys knew what orchestral music should sound like, and they know that strings played with vibrato, and that the brass were this, and the woodwinds did that, and they could have told their orchestras to do anything they wanted them to, because that's how these conductors were. They told orchestras what to do. And the playing that they got, I think they were just thrilled to have these fabulous modern orchestras at their disposal that they could do anything they want with in realizing what the composer wanted. And they knew because they knew the composers. And this is another fabulous piece of evidence because Monteux did the premiere and here he is doing it in beautiful Decca stereo in 1959. And all of those period instrument guys can take their treatises and shove them. They're so full of crap. It's a great Daphnis. You got to have it. Other great Daphnises. Here's the other guy who did too was Charles Munch, of course. Now, the problem with Charles Munch's Daphnises is this one is the 1962, I think it was, or 61 or 62, the remake. And the remake is, one was, let's see, one was 50-something. Yeah, 61 is this one. And this is the one that famously got reissued on Living Stereo SACD that everyone made such a brouhaha about. This was from like 55. Or there was 55, yes, 55. This is sort of the more famous one because it was out of print for so long and it was such a sonic splendiferosity when it was first done. But this one not only sounds better, it's a better performance all around. The orchestra was in better shape in 1962 than they were in 55, even though they were terrific in both cases. It's not that there's anything wrong, but I've always preferred 62 to 55. It has more measured tempos in 62. The concluding bacchanal is rather strictly measured compared to 55 here. And, Munch is always the guy who gets credit for being such a white-hot, psychotic, maniac, which he often was live, too. I mean, good heavens. But I have to say, I really, really think that the 62 remake just has call it a dignity to it, a warmth that's really, really special. And absolutely marvelous. And it's, like I said, the sound is better in 62. So if you have the Munch box, you've got this. Otherwise, you probably can still find this singly. Either one they're famous recordings, and rightly so, because they are marvelous. So that was great. But, however, I have to pick one. We always have to pick one. And this was a tough choice. This is a tough choice. My however version is it's just something I love because of the sound of the orchestra. And you guys probably know what it is. It's Clutins. André Clutins or Clutons or whatever this is. I've never been able to pronounce his name since I've been making these videos. You guys have been writing in, giving me phonetic pronunciations. It's never going to work. Give it up. It's this guy, Cluytens. I don't even think he knew how to pronounce it. I don't think it matters. This is such a great Ravel cycle. This was Cluytens' testament. The Ravel cycle with the Paris Conservatory Orchestra, which would soon be disbanded and vanish from the face of the earth. This was going to be it's such a historically important recording, and it's in beautiful stereo. It sounds wonderful, and you get Debussy's Jeu with it, at least on this this thing. I mean, you can find it in the big Cluitin's box or, in various other places. But I think it just gives you everything with those nice, lean-sounding strings. And one of the things that makes Daphnis from ever turning too sort of sticky or soggy is the fact that when you have an orchestra like this playing that has sort of lean sonorities, acid-sounding woodwinds, sort of tangy, vibrato-laden brass, you can schmooze around as much as you want, but the music never sounds sappy because the basic timbres are somewhat astringent. And you realize that a lot of the perfume that Ravel was doing was written in there to counterbalance the natural tartness of the orchestral sonority. And to hear a performance that does that has all of the sensuality sort of coming through the roughness, the edge to the sound, it's just wonderful. It has that aura of idiomatic authenticity that we just, want to hear, that so many modern performances lack these days because they can play the crap out of it without thinking. But it's the without thinking part that always goes wrong. Sometimes, the conductor has to tell the orchestra, make a little bit of an edgier sound and let the orchestration, work its magic, so that you hear the tension created between the beautiful, beautiful sonorities and the basic acerbity of some of the timbral predilections of the players. I mean, that's what you get here, and I just love it. I really do. But everyone's going to have their favorite Daphnis. It doesn't have to be this one. We've just gone through 18, and that's a lot of Daphniae and Chloé, whatever she is. I mean, that's really pretty damn good. And we're lucky. We're so lucky, as we are with so many other works, that there are so many fabulous performances for us all to enjoy. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Go enjoy your Daphnis. Take care.